Hello, ghouls and gamers, and of course, my fellow rejects. So, today is the feat breakdown video. We are going to go through the Psyker feats, take a look at what each of them does, look at some coherency between them. Some of them are better than others. I'll let you decide. Let's take a look at them, though. So, the first feat here that you unlock at level 5, you get a choice between Essence Harvest, which is replenish 30% toughness over 5 seconds on gaining a warp charge. Warp charges you get from using either your Blitz attack or some later on feats. So 30% toughness over 5 seconds, pretty good if you're developing warp charges fast. So if you're using a whole lot of brain burst or some of these other feats, then this could be a good feat for you. Warp absorption is replenish 10% toughness when you kill an enemy with a warp attack. So that will, of course, work with your brain burst. It'll also work with some of your staffs. It's pretty good. And then you have Quietude, which is replenishes 5% toughness for each 10% peril that you have quelled. So, personally, I believe this is the best one to start out with. If you're not sure on these, if you don't feel too comfortable on, when that's going to happen, start with Quietude. It's always useful, always comes in handy. You're almost always going back and forth on your peril. So, I believe Quietude's a good start. Some of these others may end up working out better for you in the long run. But Quietude's almost always useful. So if you don't know which one to pick, if you're not super comfortable picking, start here. Stay here if you want to. It's a great feat. These two are also good feats. Honestly, there's not many bad Psyker feats. They're all pretty good. They're just better in certain situations. So at level 10, you end up unlocking Psychonetics Wrath, which is gain between 5 and 15% damage with force weapon attacks based on your current peril. Fantastic feat. It's bonus damage based off of your peril, which once again I just said your peril is probably going to be going back and forth most of the time. The only thing that I need to point out is that it does say force weapon attacks. So if you are using a gun with your Psyker, it's not going to be that great. If you are using the special Psyker force sword, it does help that. If you're using any of these Psyker staves, it helps all of those. But that's it. That's the only, that's all that this feat helps. So if you prefer using a gun, this is not the feat for you. But if you love your staves, you love your sword, this one is a fantastic, simple damage boost for your peril going up and down, especially for staves because they produce peril anyway. So, wonderful feat. Next one is 6% peril resistance per warp charge, which is your buff that you get from killing things with brain burst, as well as there's some other feats in here that do that. It is very useful. It's very helpful, especially if you're not using. If you're not using a staff, then this is pointless anyway. So this is another. It's a good feat. The only problem is that it's great for brain bursting. So I wish it was a little bit higher than 6%, to be honest with you, but it is still a good strong feat. As far as Rack and Ruin, it is killing an elite or specialist with Brain Burst applies 2 stacks of Soul Blaze to all enemies within 3 meters of the target. It's a pretty good feat. It's just comfortable. if you kill an elite with your brain burst, everything around it gets 2 stacks of soul blaze, which is essentially a dot. It's like bleed. It just burns them over time. It's pretty good. Uh, Actually, it's pretty dang good. I would honestly put this as, if you're not using a staff, then this would probably be your best in slot here. The 6% peril, it can be comfortable, but honestly, if you're using a staff, you should probably be using Psychonetics Wrath. It's just a straight up damage boost to your stabs. It's fantastic. If you're not using a staff, then honestly, this doesn't help too much with brain bursting. 6% isn't enough to really notice a difference when you're brain bursting. So, Rack and Ruin would be your next best thing, because when you are brain bursting, you're putting a dot on things around you, around what you kill. So, I mean, that's just my personal thoughts on that. Now, at level 15, you end up locking Psychic Communion. Whenever you or your allies in coherency kill an enemy, you have a 4% chance to gain a warp charge. I do wish this was a little bit higher. 4% is decent, especially when you're in coherency. You do notice this happening for sure. You do get some stacks out of this, and it does pair with, your replenish 30% toughness with warp charge, and your peril resistance per warp charge. So that is definitely an option of a coherency build going on right there. Once again, I wish it was a little bit higher than 4%. Doesn't have to be much higher, but 4%, it's still not. It's good. Could be a little better, but it's still a very, very strong feat. Next on the level 15 tree is plus 15% combat ability cooldown on elite kill, which is your Psychonetics Wrath, which is great. That's really good, because Psychonetics Wrath is on a shorter cooldown. You'll be able to use it more often, and you'll be able to quell your peril with it more often. And also the stagger, knocking down enemies in front of you, helps. So elite kills is pretty easy to get, and the fact that it's incoherency makes it even better, because usually somebody in coherency is going to be killing elites. So it is a very strong feat. I do usually end up using Psychic Communion myself, because it's always nice to have extra warp charges on. But this is also a very strong feat. Cerebral Lacerations is damaging an enemy with your brain burst ability, causes them to take 15% damage from all non-warp sources for 5 seconds. Okay, so this is really strong, but really situational, because your brain burst is going to kill most things that it touches, other than a few Ogrins, the mutant, and monstrosities. Your brain burst is going to straight up kill most things, or almost kill them. So it weakening things for your allies is fantastic on those situations where you have those Ogrins, especially monstrosities. This is super strong against monstrosities. Just weakening it so that everybody hurts it even more. Very strong. So if you and your party are having problems with monstrosity, this might be a feat to help you out. But all in all, I do feel it is a situational feat. So moving on to the level 20 feats, we have Kinetic Deflection. While below critical peril, blocking an attack causes you to gain peril instead of losing stamina. So if you're not using the Force Sword, actually maybe even if you are using the Force Sword, this is a ridiculously strong feat. It really makes it where you can kind of block forever, uh, because you block, you get peril instead of losing stamina. You kill a couple things, and your battle meditation kicks off. Not to mention, as long as you're not using a peril building attack, you automatically lose some peril over time. So it really it works very well for your to make you tankier, be able to block more. If you don't block, if you're a person who just likes to dodge and push, and you don't actually block very much, then this probably isn't very good for you. But if you do enjoy blocking and you want to be a little bit tankier, then this is definitely a route for you. This feat's a lot stronger than it looks on paper. Underrated for sure. Very strong feat. Kinetic Shield is take between 10 and 33% reduced toughness damage from ranged attacks based on peril. Just great. I mean, you take less range damage because if you have higher peril, which, as I said before, usually you're going to be bouncing back and forth on your peril a lot. If you maintain a higher peril, you use staves, then this is just a simple, easy passive that makes you take less damage through a match, which is just good. It's just good to have. Less management on it too. So, and then there is Mind in Motion. Your movement speed is not reduced while quelling peril. This is a comfort of life feat, 100%. If you're not feeling that you need to be blocking, if you're not feeling that you're taking a whole lot of range damage, you know what? Go with Mind in Motion. Just makes your life easier. You can just quell while you're running with the rest of your team. It's very handy. It doesn't really make you stronger, and it just makes things easier on you. Not my favorite feat, but I still enjoy it. Usually by the time you hit level 20, you've gotten used to quelling on the move and when to quell, so it's okay. It's definitely a comfort of life pick though, for sure. Going on to level 25 feats, we have Warp Battery, which is can store up to 6 warp charges. I mean, no matter which way you look at it, that's 6% extra damage if you're really good at keeping up with your warp charges, especially with you know Psychic Communion, where you get extra warp charges from people in coherency killing stuff. You brain burst a lot, that's that's strong. So, I mean, 2 extra warp charges, not to mention with the level 30 feats, that becomes even stronger. So, warp battery is good. Kinetic Overload. While you have maximum warp charges, gaining a warp charge instead applies 4 stacks of Soul Blaze to a nearby enemy, prioritizing elite targets. I do not like this feat. I'm sorry. I just don't like it. If it was to all enemies around you, maybe. It wouldn't even have to be 4 stacks. Maybe it was 2 stacks and you got a reason. To me, either one of these other 2 feats is a better option. A stack, 4 stacks of Soul Blaze to a singular nearby enemy for obtaining a 5th warp charge. I would personally rather just getting that 5th warp charge and having an extra 3% bonus damage. But I'm sure it does come in useful, but super situational, man. Like, super situational. Either you don't have an elite near you, or maybe you've got 2 elites near you, it hits the wrong one, or, usually if you have elites near you, you're going to be trying to kill it actively anyway. I I don't think Kinetic Overload is good. But this one is, which is all attacks have a 10% chance on hit to brain burst the target. This cannot occur while at critical peril and has a cooldown of 15 seconds. This is Kinetic Flair. So I love everything about this feat except for that 15-second cooldown. I wish it was a little shorter. It ain't got to be a lot shorter, but I wish it was a little shorter. Because the brain burst happens fairly frequently. 10% is pretty good. And on all attacks. That means you can put on a recon las and be blasting. Just straight blasting. And have a chance. And each of those attacks have a 10% chance of brain bursting something. Which also gives you a stack of your where is it? Where is this it? Yeah, your warp charge. It does give you a stack of warp charge. So if you stack this with Psychic Communion, you're gonna get pretty good bit of warp charges, even if you're not brain bursting, which is super handy. And I also kind of wish, I feel like Kinetic Overload would be a better feat if it wasn't on the same tier as Kinetic Flair. Like, there would be better build options with, if it wasn't on the same tree. But it being here between Kinetic Flair and Warp Battery makes it eh. But Kinetic Flair is good. Wish it was on shorter cooldown. At least it is at only 15 seconds. So with, these lasting 25 seconds makes it, makes it a little better on that. Because you can put it with like a Chain Lightning staff or a Purgatus staff. And, you're hitting a lot of things. So you got a pretty good chance of that happening. So pretty much, do you want 6 stacks or do you want, Kinetic Flair? That's, I personally feel like, do you like brain bursting a lot? Or do you like, attacking with your weapon a lot? Is your options on this one. But yeah, that's just my personal opinion. Moving on to the level 30 feats. This is where you get Quicken, which is Psychonetics Wrath expends all warp charges, reducing cooldown by 12.5% for each warp charge removed. That is a lot of cooldown if you have, especially if you have 6 warp charges. But even at 4 warp charges, that's what 30%. 30% cooldown reduction for 4 warp charges. It's a pretty good chunk of cooldown reduction. Now you have to give up all your warp charges, but it's still pretty good cooldown reduction. Then you have Ascendant Blaze, which is Psychonetics Wrath, expends all warp charges and applies a stack of Soul Blaze to enemies hit based on the number of warp charges expended. Enemies killed by your Soul Blaze effects, from any source, have a 10% chance to grant you a warp charge. I ain't gonna lie, I didn't read that second part until just now. That might actually make Kinetic Overload better. Kinetic Overload and the other one, the one that applies a burn. There you go. Rack and Ruin. That may be a build option that I haven't checked out. I might want to look at that. Okay, so I haven't play tested that. I'm gonna have to run a few games and see how that runs together and see if that's worth it. I apologize for my lack of preparation on this. But either way, applying warp charge, you remove all your warp charges, you Soul Blaze everything in front of you. If you're at 4 stacks, it applies 4 Soul Blaze, 6 stacks, 6 Soul Blaze. At first I was like, yeah, that's that's okay. But now seeing enemies killed by your soul blaze effects from any source, putting on more warp charges, that's pretty good. Actually, the second part's better than the first part, in my opinion. But but yeah, I mean, if you're willing to give up cooldown reduction, it's a definite good one. I also like Kinetic Barrage, which is just for 10 seconds after using Psychonetics Wrath, your brain burst charges 25% faster and consumes 50% less peril. That's pretty dang cool. That's just pretty much if you're brain bursting your head off, you can brain burst, brain burst, brain burst. Connect barrage, brain burst, brain burst, brain burst, and then your brain bursts are even faster. So, yeah, if you're a brain burst man, if you just love going crazy on the brain burst, this is definitely the feat for you. Um, yeah. Well, I'm gonna go check out some runs with this Ascendant Blaze, and you guys have a good one. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch y'all next time. Um, Stay swampy.